313 Edict of Milan. The emperors Licinius and Constantine grant the Christians freedom of cult. 318-320 The priest Arius of Alexandria denies the divine nature of Christ that he judges to be subordinated to God Father and only similar to him. The Arian theses are condemned by the Council of Alexandria. 325 The Council of Nicaea condemns newly Arianism. 330 Inauguration of Constantinople. 355 Franks and Alemanni invade Gaul. 374 Ambrose, Bishop of Milan. 375 Pope Damasus proclaims the supremacy in doctrinal matter of the Bishop of Rome as Peter's successor. 380 Edict of Thessalonica. Christianity is proclaimed official religion of the Roman Empire and the pagan cults are prohibited. 387 Conversion to Christianity of Augustine, eventually Bishop of Hippo. 395 Death of the Emperor Theodosius and split of the empire among the children Honorius, Western Roman Empire, and Arcadius, Eastern Roman Empire. 405 Alans, Suebi, Ostrogoths, and Vandals invade Italy. 406 Invasion of Gaul by the Alans, the Suebi, and the Vandals. 409 Invasion of Spain by the Alans, the Suebi, and the Vandals. 410 The Visigoths of Alaric sack Rome. 411-416 Controversy around Pelagius' doctrines that affirmed the complete liberty of men to choose between good and evil. The Pelagian theses are contrasted by Augustine of Hippo and condemned by the Synod of Carthage. 429 The Vandals invade North Africa. 431 The Council of Ephesus condemns the Nestorian theories that deemed Christ to be provided with the only human nature, monophysitism. 451 Council of Chalcedon. The dogma of the double nature, human and divine, of Christ is proclaimed. 452-453 The Huns, led by Attila, invade northern Italy, but they renounce to sack Rome. 555 New sack of Rome by hand of the Vandals of Gaiseric. 476 Odoacer, a commander of the barbarian militias at the service of the Western Roman Empire, deposes the Emperor Romulus Augustus, and he sends the imperial ensigns to Constantinople. 480 Odoacer governs on the Italian peninsula and on part of Sicily. 489 Expedition in Italy of the Ostrogoths led by King Theodoric. 493 Surrendering of Odoacer and his killing by the Ostrogoths. 496 Baptism of the Frankish King Clovis. 500 Benedict of Nursia founds the first community around Subiaco. 512 Theodoric controls all of Italy, good part of Sicily, Dalmatia, part of Noricum, Swabia, Pannonia, and Spain. 526 Death of Theodoric. He is succeeded by Athalaric, son of his daughter Amalasuntha. 527 Justinian, Byzantine Emperor. 529 Foundation of the Monastery of Monte Cassino by Benedict of Nursia. Justinian starts the drafting of the Corpus Juris Civilis, concluded 5 years later. 534 Death of Athalaric. Amalasuntha governs the Ostrogoths, but she is deposed and killed by her second husband Theodath. 535 The Byzantine Emperor Justinian intervenes militarily in Italy. The Byzantine Gothic War begins. 547 Benedict of Nursia dies. 554 The Goths surrender to the Byzantine general Narses. With the pragmatic sanction, the Emperor Justinian starts the political administrative reorganization of Italy. 568, the Longobards led by Alboin descend in Italy and occupy Friuli and part of Veneto. 569-572, Longobard occupation of northern and central Italy up to Camerino, Spoleto and Benevent. Alboin is killed by his wife Rosmund. 589, with the Council of Toledo, the Visigoths abandon Arianism for Catholicism. 590, Pope Gregory the Great is elected. 596, Pope Gregory the Great sends Augustine and other 40 monks to evangelize England. 622, Muhammad abandons the city of Mecca and settles in Medina. 632, Death of Muhammad. 639, Dagobert, the last great sovereign of the Merovingian dynasty, dies. The kingdom of the Franks is split in two kingdoms, Austrasia and Neustria. 643, Promulgation of Rotary's Edict. 673, Dynastic reunification of Austrasia and Neustria under Chilperic II. 687, Pippin of Herstal, majordome of Austrasia, is the real power holder. 711, the Arabs invade Spain, destroying the kingdom of the Visigoths. 715, majordome of Austrasia, Charles Martel, illegitimate son of Pippin of Herstal. 730, Byzantine Emperor Leo III, opposed to the cult of sacred images, imposes their destruction through an edict. It's the period of iconoclasm that concludes itself only in 787. 732, Charles Martel defeats the Arabs at Poitiers. 751, Pippin the Short, son of Charles Martel, detronizes the last Merovingian sovereign and proclaims himself king of the Franks, obtaining the approval of Pope Zachary. 753, Pope Stephen II escapes from Rome and seeks the help of the king of the Franks, Pippin, against the Longobards. 754, Pippin defeats Aistulf, king of the Longobards, and forces him to peace with the papacy. 756, new war between the Franks and the Longobards. 758-766, new conflicts between the Longobards and the papacy backed by the Franks. 768, death of Pepin, Charles and Carloman, kings of the Franks. 771, death of Carloman and Charles becomes sole king of the Franks. 772-773, new conflict between the king of the Longobards Desiderius and Pope Hadrian I that asks the Franks for help. 774, Charlemagne is proclaimed king of the Franks and of the Longobards. 775-776, the Longobard revolt led by Adelchis, son of Desiderius, fails. 799, campaign of Charlemagne in Spain. 800, Charlemagne is crowned by Pope Leo III, emperor of what would become the Holy Roman Empire. 814, Charlemagne dies and he is succeeded by his son Louis, known as the Pious. 840, death of Louis the Pious, beginning of the contracts for the partition of the empire among his sons Lothair, Charles and Louis. 843, Treaty of Verdun assigning the kingdom of the Eastern Franks to Louis the German, that of the Western Franks to Charles the Bald. To the Emperor Lothair pertains a strip of land from Frisia to today's Provence and the Italic kingdom. 875, Charles the Bald becomes emperor and king of Italy. 877, Charles the Bald emanates at Quercy, a capitulary in which for the first time the inheritance of the major fiefs is recognized. 881, Charles the Fat, king of the Western Franks, becomes emperor. 888, death of Charles the Fat. 902, the Arabs accomplish the conquest of Sicily. 910 Foundation of the Benedictine Monastery of Cluny. 919 Henry I, Duke of Saxony, is elected King of Germany. 936 Otto I of Saxony, King of Germany. 955 Military victories of Otto against the Hungars and the Slavs. 962 Otto crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. The dynasty of the Saxon emperors begins. 987 Hugues Capet elected King of France. 1012 the Ravenate Romuald founds the monastery of Camaldoli in the diocese of Arezzo. 1024 Conrad II, King of Germany, and 3 years later Emperor. The Franconian dynasty begins. 1035 the Norman William the Bastard becomes Duke of Normandy. 1036 the Florentine John Gualbert founds the monastery of Vallombrosa near Florence. 1037 Edict of the Emperor Conrad II, with which is proclaimed the inheritance of all the fiefs of the vassalitic hierarchy. 1042 a group of Normans takes control of a portion of western Apulia. 1044 Emperor Henry III annexed to the empire the crowns of Bohemia and of Hungary. 1056 Religious movement of the Pateria. Henry IV is emperor at only 6 years old. 1059 the Norman Robert Guiscard, Duke of Apulia, completes the conquest of Calabria. 1061 Robert the Guiscard and his brother Roger begin the conquest of Sicily. 1066 William of Normandy, the conqueror, lands in England and becomes its sovereign. 1075 Dictatus Papae of Gregory VII that establishes the prohibition to the laymen of granting ecclesiastical investitures and affirms the supreme papal authority in temporal and spiritual affairs. 1076 Diet of Worms. Henry IV declares deposed Gregory VII that excommunicates the emperor and absolves his subjects from the oath of fealty. 1077 Emperor Henry IV humiliates himself at Canossa to obtain the absolution from the excommunication emanated by Gregory VII. 1085 William the Conqueror issues the drafting of the Domesday Book, the cadastre of the real estates of England, that will be completed in 2 years. 1095 Pope Urban II launches the crusade. 1098 Foundation of the monastery of Citeaux in Burgundy, of strict observance of the Benedictine rule. 1099 the Crusaders conquer Jerusalem. 1122 the Concordat of Worms between Emperor Henry V and Pope Calixtus II puts an end to the struggle over the investitures between papacy and empire. The spiritual investiture of the bishops of the empire pertains to the papacy and the temporal one to the emperor. 1138 Conrad III of Hohenstaufen, Duke of Swabia, is elected King of Germany. 1130 After a long conflict, Roger II, already Duke of Apulia, Calabria and Sicily, is invested by the Pope of the crown of Sicily. 1152 Frederick I of Swabia, nephew of Conrad II, is King of Germany. 1167 Constitution of the Lombard League, founded by the communes of Cremona, Brescia, Bergamo, Mantua, Milan, and by the communes of the Veronese League against Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa. 1176 Battle of Legnano. The forces of the Lombard League defeat the army of Barbarossa. 1179 The Third Lateran Council establishes that for the papal election 2/3 of the conclave votes are necessary, and it abolishes every confirmation by the side of the emperor. 1183 Peace of Constance, with which the Italian communes see recognized their right to self-determination while remaining under the high imperial authority. 1186 marriage between Constance of Hauteville, daughter of Roger II, and Henry VI of Swabia, son of the Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa. 1189, after the conquest of Jerusalem by Salah ad-Din, the Third Crusade is banished. 1194, Henry VI is crowned King of Sicily. 1197, death of Henry VI, the son Frederick II of Sicily under the regency of the mother Constance and of Pope Innocent III. 1204, the Crusaders capture Constantinople, Fourth Crusade. 1209-1210, Francis of Assisi and his first brethren obtained the verbal recognition of their common lifestyle. 1212, Frederick II crowned King of Germany. Victory of Alfonso VIII of Castile over the Arab troops at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, opening the way to the conquest of a great part of southern Andalusia. 1214, Battle of Bouvines. Philip II Augustus of France, allied of Frederick II, defeats the Anglo-German forces of Otto of Brunswick, aspiring to the imperial crown. 1215, John Lackland is forced by the English barons to ratify the Magna Carta Libertatum, with which he recognizes the limits of the crown power and of the baronial authority. The Fourth Lateran Councils condemns as heretics the Cathars or Albigensians, the Valdensians, and the Joachimites. 1216, Fifth Crusade, first recognition by the Holy See to the rising order of the preaching friars, the Dominicans. 1219-1220, various acts of Pope Honorius III with which he recognizes and he builds the religious order of the Franciscan minor friars. 1220, Frederick II is crowned emperor. 1223, approval of the Franciscan rule. 1225-1226, crusade of Louis VIII of France against the Cathars in Languedoc. 1226, death of Francis of Assisi that will be sanctified 2 years later. 1227-1228, conflict between Frederick II and the Popes Honorius III and Gregory IX that excommunicate the emperor. 1228, Sixth Crusade, the Emperor Frederick II of Swabia negotiates the surrender of Jerusalem. 1231, the constitutions of Melfi with which Frederick II reorganizes the laws and the customs of the Kingdom of Sicily. 1232, Gregory IX institutes the Inquisition for the clash against heresy, entrusting it to the Dominicans, to which will be added the minor friars. 1248, Seventh Crusade, led by Louis IX of France, the Lombard League defeats at Parma the imperial forces of Frederick II. 1250, death of Frederick II. 1256, Manfred, Prince of Taranto, natural son of Frederick II, seizes the crown of Sicily at the detriment of his nephew and legitimate heir Conradin. 1266, Battle of Benevent, Manfred is defeated by the troops of Charles of Anjou, brother of the King of France, that obtains by the Pope the crown of Sicily. 1268, Conradin of Swabia is defeated at Tagliacozzo and decapitated. 1270, Eighth and Last Crusade, concluding itself with a 12 years truce with the Muslims. 1277, Otto Visconti, Archbishop of Milan, defeats the family della Torre and becomes lord of the city. 1282, the anti-Angevin revolt, known as the Sicilian Vespers, breaks out in Palermo. 1289, Obitz of Este is declared Lord of Ferrara, that he rules from 25 years. 1291, the last crusading strongholds in the Holy Land fall. 1296, Frederick, brother of the King James II of Aragon, is proclaimed King of Sicily by the Sicilian barons. 1297, Major Council lockout in Venice. From now on, only those who have been members in the previous 4 years or those who will be proposed by the Doge and by his own councils will be part of it. 1302, Unam Sanctam Bull, with which Boniface VIII reaffirms the papal supremacy on the sovereign's power. 1303, the French and their allies of the Colonna family arrest Boniface VIII at Anagni, episode of the slap. 1308, Henry VII of Luxembourg is elected emperor. 1309, Clement V transfers the papal see to Avignon. 1327-1328, Raumfahrt of Emperor Ludwig the Bavarian. 1328, with the death without heirs of Charles IV of France, the direct descent of Hugh Capet extinguishes. The throne passes to the cousin Philip VI of Valois. The Gonzaga become lords of Mantua. 1337, the 100 Years' War between France and England begins. 1347, Black Death made its appearance in Messina. It's the beginning of an epidemic that will invest in the following years the entire Europe, provoking millions of dead. 1356, Golden Bull of the Emperor Charles IV of Luxembourg, with which the imperial election is entrusted to 7 elector princes. 4 lay ones, the King of Bohemia, the Count of the Rhine-Palatinate, the Duke of Saxony, the Margrave of Brandenburg, and 3 ecclesiastical ones, the Archbishops of Trier, Mainz, and Cologne. 1348, revolt in the countryside and insurrection in Paris. 1377, Gregory XI brings back the Holy See to Rome. 1378, election of Urban VI, not recognized by the French cardinals that elect Clement VII, that establishes himself in Avignon. It's the Great Schism of the West. 1389, Battle of Kosovo, the Serbians defeated by the Ottoman army. 1395, Gian Galeazzo Visconti obtains the feudal investiture as Duke of Milan by the Emperor Wenceslaus of Bohemia. 1407, within the context of the 100 Years' War, the civil war between the supporters of the Duke of Burgundy, the Burgundians, and the ones of the Count of Armagnac, the Armagnacs, breaks out. 1414, the Council of Constance is summoned to put an end to the Western Schism. 1416, Alfonso V of Aragon reunites on him the crowns of Aragon, Catalonia, Valencia, and Sicily. 1417, election of Pope Martin V. 1429, Jeanne d'Arc frees Orléans, besieged by the English. 1431, Charles VII is crowned King of France in Rheims. Trial and execution of Jeanne d'Arc by the English. 1436, the forces of Charles VII of France recapture Paris from the English. 1439, new schism within the Church with the election of Amadeus VIII, Duke of Savoy, as antipope with the name of Felix V, that will conclude itself 10 years later with the resignment of the antipope. 1443, Alfonso V of Aragon enters Naples. 1450, the condottiere Francesco Sforza conquers Milan, of which he is proclaimed duke after the extinction of the Visconti dynasty 3 years before. 1452, Frederick III of Habsburg, elected emperor 12 years before, is crowned in Rome. It's the last imperial crowning that has place in the Eternal City. 1453, Constantinople is conquered by the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II. The 100 Years' War ends, and in England the civil war known of the Two Roses between the houses of York and Lancaster begins. That of Alfonso V of Aragon, to the sons Ferrand and John II go respectively the crowns of Naples and of Aragon. 1454, the Treaty of Lodi between Milan and Venice begins a 40-year peace in the Italian peninsula granted by the signing in the following year of the Italic League between Naples, Milan, the Papacy, Florence, and Venice. 1459, Serbia is under the complete Ottoman control, such as 4 years later Bosnia. 1469, marriage between Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Aragon, and Isabel Infanta of Castile. 1479, Isabel of Castile wins the civil war against the supporters of her sister Joanna. 1485, in England, with the victory of Henry VII Tudor at Bosworth, the War of the Two Roses ends. 1492, the Kingdom of Granada, the last Arab dominion in the Iberian Peninsula, is conquered by the Catholic kings Ferdinand and Isabel. Decree of expulsion of the Jews from all their dominions. The discovery of America.